Hold on to your seats because Jasmine Crockett just took down Donald Trump in a way you have to see to believe. With a single powerful question, she completely leaves him speechless. Watch as the president crumbles in just 3 seconds. This is the moment that proves Jasmine's unstoppable, and you don't want to miss it. Get ready for a political showdown that's sure to leave you in awe. It was a day like any other in Washington, D.C. The halls of the Capitol were buzzing with the usual chatter. The political machinery of the nation was turning, and the world was focused on the latest discussions of policies, bills, and the drama of the day. But no one could have prepared for what was about to happen. In one of the most intense political arenas of all time, Jasmine Crockett, a sharp-tongued and fearless Congresswoman, entered the room like a storm. She wasn't just there for a normal back-and-forth debate. She had something much bigger in mind. Today, her target wasn't just another policy or law. It was the very core of the political empire built by the president himself. Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States, had been at the center of controversy for years. By 2025, he wasn't just a figurehead. He was a force, with a reputation for always being prepared, always ready with an answer, and always in control of any room he walked into. Donald Trump was, at least on the surface, unshakable. But today was different. Jasmine Crockett had come prepared for the moment when the unshakable would finally be rattled. As the debate began, everything seemed normal. Politicians were trading words like they always did, trying to make points, cutting each other off and debating back and forth. But Jasmine had a question that she had been planning to ask for a long time. A question that would not only make the crowd go silent, but would expose something much deeper, something everyone had been wondering but no one had the courage to ask. The question was simple, but powerful, so powerful it would rock the foundations of everything Trump had built. Jasmine leaned forward, looking directly at the president. Her voice, calm and calculated, broke through the noise. "Is Ivanka your wife or daughter?" The room fell silent. For a brief moment, it felt like the world stopped spinning. Every eye in the room was on Trump. His face, once filled with the usual confidence, suddenly seemed to freeze. The air thickened. You could feel the tension growing, squeezing the space tighter with every passing second. Trump's eyes widened for the briefest moment, a flash of uncertainty crossing his face. He wasn't prepared for this. Jasmine had caught him off guard, and there was no way out. Now, at first glance, the question may have seemed simple, almost innocent. "Is Ivanka your wife or daughter?" But the weight behind those words was anything but innocent. It wasn't just about his relationship with Ivanka. It was about everything that had always been whispered about them. The way their relationship blurred the lines between family and business. The way Ivanka had played a pivotal role in his political career, his businesses, and his public life. Was she more than just his daughter? Was there a deeper connection that people had been afraid to discuss? Trump, the man who had faced countless questions about his policies, his businesses, and even his personal life, was suddenly being asked something far more personal, something no one had dared to bring up before. And in that moment, it was clear. This question wasn't just about exposing a relationship. It was about exposing a vulnerability. Jasmine had known exactly what she was doing. She had watched as Ivanka Trump played an influential role in her father's career, not just as a daughter, but as a trusted advisor, a shadow at his side in meetings, on business trips, and even in the halls of power. The question cut to the heart of a much larger issue, the blending of family and power. And Jasmine had made it clear. She wasn't afraid to ask the question everyone was thinking, but here's where it got even more intense. Trump didn't answer right away. The room was thick with silence as Trump's face slowly shifted. For a man who had built an empire on being quick-witted and controlling every moment, this was uncharted territory. Jasmine's question had left him stunned. His sharp response time, his usual cutting remarks, his ability to always be prepared, they were gone, replaced by something no one had ever seen from him before: hesitation. The seconds seemed to stretch on forever as Trump searched for a way to respond. You could see his mind working in overdrive, trying to figure out how to handle the question without letting too much slip. But there was no easy answer. What could he say? Could he deny the undeniable closeness between him and Ivanka? Could he pretend that their relationship had always been just a typical father-daughter bond? But then there was another problem. Trump couldn't afford to ignore the question. The room was waiting. The cameras were on. The world was watching. If he ignored it, if he brushed it off, it would only make him look weaker. The audience, the media, and everyone present were on the edge of their seats, waiting for Trump to speak. But with every passing second, it was becoming more and more clear that Jasmine's question wasn't something Trump could escape. This was it. The moment where the game changed. Would Trump answer, or would his silence speak volumes? Jasmine was calm, unfazed. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just trying to embarrass him, she was trying to expose the cracks in the armor that had made Trump untouchable for so long. And she knew that this moment, this one question, was going to have repercussions far beyond just this room. But would Trump buckle under pressure? Or would he find a way to regain control of the situation? When Jasmine Crockett asked her bold question, she didn't just ask a simple query, she set a trap. And that trap was expertly designed to expose the cracks in Trump's carefully crafted persona. But what made this question so dangerous? What made it so powerful that even the mighty Donald Trump, who was used to facing fiery debates and criticism, was caught completely off guard? The answer is simple. Jasmine knew exactly where to strike. From the moment Ivanka Trump stepped into the public spotlight, she was more than just the president's daughter. Over the years, she became a trusted advisor, a close partner in his business empire, and even had a hand in the White House during Trump's first term. To the public, Ivanka was always portrayed as the daughter, the poised and polished first daughter. But to those on the inside, her relationship with Trump always seemed a little different. Ivanka wasn't just his daughter. She was his right hand. She was at his side during business deals, taking the lead in meetings and standing as his closest ally. People started to question, was Ivanka playing a much bigger role than a daughter should? How much of this was about family, and how much of it was about power? Jasmine Crockett, who had followed these developments closely, knew exactly how to bring this complex relationship into the light. The genius of Jasmine's question lay not just in what it asked, but in what it revealed. Is Ivanka your wife or daughter? Wasn't just an innocent question, it was a loaded one. The implications were huge. With a single sentence, Jasmine forced Trump into a corner, making him confront a question that couldn't be ignored. For someone who had spent years building an image of invincibility, this was a moment that would test whether Trump could maintain control or finally crack under the pressure. Jasmine was no rookie when it came to handling Trump. She had watched him for years, observed the way he navigated controversy and used his charm and sharp wit to deflect uncomfortable questions. But she knew the game he played, and now she was changing the rules. Trump, who had made a career out of answering tough questions with ease, suddenly found himself in an uncharted territory. Jasmine's question wasn't about his policies or his business deals. It was about his family. Family, which for Trump was sacred and inseparable from his empire. To answer the question honestly would reveal a deeper truth than he was prepared to share. He had always claimed that Ivanka was his daughter, of course. But what about the other side? The side where Ivanka was more than just a child, more than a daughter. She was someone who had helped him with countless business dealings, who had worked alongside him as a trusted advisor in the White House, who had taken on roles that most children wouldn't even consider. That wasn't just a father-daughter relationship. That was power, politics, and ambition intertwined. But here's the thing. Trump couldn't simply deny it. The public had watched him and Ivanka for years. They had seen the two of them share close moments, business meetings, private dinners, and even public appearances where Ivanka was always by his side. The world had seen Ivanka act as if she were more than just a daughter, stepping in to play roles far beyond her years. The lines had been blurred so often that a question like Jasmine's suddenly became impossible to ignore. Jasmine had timed her strike perfectly. She knew that Trump was a man who thrived on controlling the narrative, who had built an empire by staying ahead of everyone else's questions. But by throwing this curveball, she put him on the defensive in a way that no one had done before. For once, Trump wasn't in control. He wasn't the one making the rules. Jasmine had just turned the tables on him, forcing him to reckon with something that even he hadn't planned for. As the seconds passed, Trump's usual confidence began to slip. He had always been a master at deflecting tough questions, but this one was different. It wasn't about his policies or his stance on issues, it was personal. His relationship with Ivanka wasn't something he could brush off with a quick quip. This wasn't just politics. This was about something deeper, about how far he was willing to blur the lines between family and power. And Jasmine was pushing him to confront that uncomfortable truth. The question wasn't just an inquiry, it was an invitation to reveal his vulnerability. Trump had always prided himself on being able to handle any question that came his way, but now, for the first time, Jasmine had made him confront something he couldn't simply talk his way out of. The audience, watching intently, could feel the shift in the room. Trump, for the first time in years, looked unsure. His eyes flickered nervously, searching for a way to get out of this. But there was no escape. Jasmine didn't back down. She wasn't going to let him sidestep the question. She had set the trap, and now she was waiting for Trump to take the bait. For Trump, this was uncharted territory. He had always controlled the narrative. But in that moment, Jasmine Crockett had flipped the script. She wasn't just asking questions. She was forcing Trump to answer something that no one had dared ask before. And the world was waiting for his response. Would he dodge it? Would he deflect, as he always did? Or would he be forced to confront the awkward, uncomfortable truth about his relationship with Ivanka? The world held its breath, knowing that whatever happened next would be the turning point in this dramatic exchange. The room was electric, charged with an intensity that could be felt in every corner. Jasmine Crockett had just asked the question that no one else dared to ask, the question that had been on the lips of many but never spoken aloud. Is Ivanka your wife or daughter? And now it was Trump's turn to respond. For a man who had made a career of quickly answering questions, twisting narratives, and always being in control, this moment was different. This was uncharted territory. This wasn't about policies, debates, or talking points. It was about something personal, something that cut deep, straight to the heart of his public and private life. Trump, the 45th President of the United States, the man who had weathered scandals, allegations, and controversies without breaking a sweat, now stood in front of the cameras, paralyzed by silence. The usual sharpness in his eyes was gone. For the first time in years, the man who always had a quick response, a clever comeback, seemed lost for words. Jasmine's question had done more than just rattle him. It had exposed a vulnerability he wasn't ready to face. In that long, drawn-out pause, as the seconds ticked by like hours, Trump was trapped. He didn't just need an answer. He needed to protect the image he had so carefully constructed over decades. The silence in the room grew louder with each passing second. The camera lenses were focused on him, the audience held their breath, and even his closest allies in the room waited anxiously. The pressure was palpable. For a man who had always prided himself on being the one in control, this was the first time he was truly powerless. Trump shifted his weight. His hands subtly clenched, his lips parted as if he were about to speak. But nothing came out. The usual bravado was missing. There was no quick wit, no snappy retort. Only the echo of his own thoughts, running 1,000,000 miles an hour, searching for a way to escape this uncomfortable question. But there was no escape. There was no clever dodge. Jasmine had cut too deep, and now the world was watching to see what he would do next. It wasn't just the question itself, it was what the question implied. Ivanka wasn't just his daughter in the traditional sense. She had become an extension of his power. She had been by his side for years, not just as a daughter, but as a partner in his business empire, a trusted advisor, and a key player in his political campaigns. She had taken on roles that most children would never dream of. She had acted more like a wife than a daughter in the way she shaped policy, made decisions, and helped steer the ship of the Trump brand. Could Trump deny the complexity of their relationship without revealing too much? Could he brush it off without drawing more attention to what had always been a murky boundary between family and business? The question Jasmine had posed wasn't just about labeling a relationship. It was about confronting the uncomfortable truth that the relationship between Trump and Ivanka had always gone beyond what the public had been led to believe. As the silence continued to stretch, it was clear to everyone that this wasn't just an awkward pause. This was a moment of reckoning. Trump wasn't just avoiding a question, he was avoiding an uncomfortable reality. And Jasmine, with her sharp instincts, knew exactly how to push him into this corner. The room was tense. Every eye was fixed on Trump, waiting for him to speak, to break the silence. But the more he hesitated, the more his silence seemed to speak louder than any words ever could. Was he unsure of how to respond? Or was he calculating the damage, trying to figure out just how much he could say without exposing his family's complex web of relationships? The longer the silence lingered, the more powerful Jasmine's question became. The audience could feel it. The tension was like a pressure cooker about to explode. Trump had been in countless high-stakes situations, but nothing like this. He had faced down world leaders, defied public opinion, and even stared down the media without breaking a sweat. But here, in this moment, Jasmine had put him in an impossible position. There was no way to answer without drawing unwanted attention to a situation that had been carefully hidden from the public for years. Trump cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment, but the words didn't come. It was almost as if he were struggling to find the right balance between staying in power and revealing too much. Could he laugh it off? Could he dismiss it with a joke? Or would he have to confront the deeper implications of the question? Jasmine, on the other hand, remained calm. She wasn't pushing for an immediate answer. She was letting the silence hang in the air, and that silence was the most powerful weapon of all. By asking this question, she had exposed a vulnerability in Trump that no one had ever seen before. It wasn't just about whether Ivanka was his wife or daughter. It was about how he had woven his family into the fabric of his business and politics in a way that left no room for clear answers. The silence stretched on, and with each passing second, the stakes grew higher. Would Trump crack under the pressure? Would he finally answer, or would he continue to stall? No one knew. But one thing was certain. This moment had changed everything, and as the camera focused on Trump's face, it was clear. This wasn't just a question anymore. It was a turning point. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Donald Trump, who had always been the master of deflecting tough questions, was now caught in an uncomfortable silence. His face, usually composed and confident, betrayed a hint of uncertainty. The moment was slipping away, and Jasmine Crockett, sharp and poised, was watching the clock tick down with deliberate patience. She knew that Trump was a fighter. He always had a response ready, always managed to wriggle out of tight spots. But Jasmine had a plan. She wasn't just asking a question, she was setting a trap. And she could feel the power shifting in the room. Trump was floundering. His usual bravado had evaporated, and in its place, there was something unfamiliar. Doubt. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a way to escape this moment. But Jasmine wasn't going to let him off the hook. She wasn't going to let him squirm his way out of answering. She had him right where she wanted him. The ball was now firmly in his court, and she was not going to give him any space to dodge. The room grew quieter, the weight of the silence becoming almost unbearable. It wasn't just a pause. It was a turning point. Jasmine had thrown the first punch, but Trump hadn't responded. And with every passing second, the pressure mounted. Trump knew it too. He was at a crossroads. He couldn't just laugh it off. He couldn't deflect. If he didn't answer, the silence would speak louder than anything he could say. That's when Jasmine decided it was time to press forward, to turn the screws even tighter. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Trump's. Her voice was calm, but it carried a sharpness that cut through the tension in the room. "Are you going to answer the question, Mr. President? Or are you too afraid to speak the truth?" With that, the room collectively held its breath. The words hit Trump like a hammer. Jasmine wasn't just challenging him to respond, she was questioning his courage, his very integrity. The tone of her voice, the calm authority in it, made it clear. She wasn't playing by the usual rules. This wasn't a debate. This wasn't a political exchange. This was a challenge. And she was daring him to face the truth. Trump, visibly rattled, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The deflection, the witty comeback, the usual way of sidestepping uncomfortable moments, none of that would work now. Jasmine had made sure of it. She had placed him in a position where he couldn't hide behind his usual tactics. He could feel the room watching him, waiting for him to say something, anything. But the longer he stayed silent, the more his hesitation began to eat away at his public image. The powerful, unshakable figure that Trump had spent years cultivating was now crumbling. It wasn't just the question, it was the way Jasmine had framed it. She hadn't just asked about Ivanka. She had framed it as a challenge to his character. She had drawn a line in the sand. Answer or admit something deeper. In that moment, Trump realized that he couldn't just avoid the truth. The question wasn't about his relationship with Ivanka. It was about his entire approach to power and family. Jasmine had thrown the spotlight on the blurred lines between his business empire and his family ties. She had exposed the part of him that had always been the most vulnerable, his reliance on Ivanka, the way their bond went beyond the usual father-daughter dynamic. The way it became intertwined with his very identity. For a moment, Trump seemed to shrink, his larger-than-life persona faltering. He had always been the one who controlled every room, who dominated every conversation. But now, faced with the undeniable truth that Jasmine had laid bare, he couldn't find his footing. He was drowning in the pressure of the moment, and that's when Jasmine delivered the final blow. She wasn't done. She wasn't about to let him off the hook just because he couldn't answer. "Mr. President, you're here to lead, but you can't even answer a simple question. Why is that?" she pressed, her voice unwavering. She had shifted the conversation from a simple question to a full-on examination of Trump's leadership, and with every word, she dug deeper into the very fabric of his power. The crowd felt the shift. The room seemed to close in around Trump. His face grew flush with frustration, but his words failed him. Jasmine had caught him off guard. She had exposed a side of him no one expected. The tough, larger-than-life leader who had dominated the political scene was now reduced to a man who could barely find the words to respond. In the few seconds that followed, Trump's silence did more damage than anything he could have said. The longer he stayed silent, the more it became clear to everyone in the room. Jasmine had won this round. She had taken control of the narrative, forced him into a corner, and exposed the cracks in his armor. Jasmine didn't just ask a question. She delivered a knockout punch. She had played him perfectly. She had forced him into a moment where he couldn't recover, and that moment would haunt him for days to come. It was over. The audience knew it. Trump knew it. And Jasmine? She knew she had just turned the entire conversation upside down. This wasn't just a political exchange anymore. It was a turning point. And Jasmine Crockett had just made history. The moment the final words left Jasmine Crockett's lips, the room seemed to shift. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the silence hung in the air like a heavy fog. What had just unfolded wasn't just a debate, it was an unraveling. Jasmine had done something that no one thought was possible. She had exposed a side of Donald Trump that he desperately wanted to keep hidden. And now the aftermath was settling in. Trump, once the man who seemed invincible in any political battle, stood there, visibly rattled. The carefully constructed image of the confident, sharp-tongued president was slipping. The silence, his refusal to answer, spoke louder than any words could. It wasn't just about one question. It was about the very foundation of his public persona. Jasmine had not only asked him to explain his relationship with Ivanka, but she had also made him confront the blurring of family and power in a way no one had dared before. The crowd, which had been watching in anticipation, could feel the shift. It wasn't just a political win. It was a psychological one. The president, the once unshakable figure, was now the one on the defensive. His pause wasn't just a moment of hesitation. It was a crack in his armor, and everyone in that room could see it. Jasmine stood calmly, her posture unwavering. She didn't need to say anything more. She had already won. In those few moments, she had done what many thought impossible. She had forced Trump to acknowledge something he wasn't prepared to face. His silence had become his answer. The fallout from that moment didn't just ripple through the room, it spread like wildfire. The media, the public, everyone who had watched knew this wasn't just another political exchange. This was a turning point. For the first time in years, Trump wasn't the one calling the shots. He had been caught in a moment of vulnerability, and the world was watching. What came next was inevitable: the backlash. For Trump, this wasn't just about a failed answer, it was about control. He had always been the master of the narrative. He controlled the conversations, twisted the stories, and dominated the public's perception. But now, for the first time, the tables had turned. Jasmine had taken control, and the questions were no longer about policy or political strategies. The question had become personal, and that was something Trump had never fully prepared for. The media jumped on the moment, replaying the silence over and over again. Headlines splashed across screens, each one echoing the same question: why couldn't Trump answer? The commentary came fast, and the question of his relationship with Ivanka, once a whispered rumor, now exploded into the public consciousness. It wasn't just a matter of political discourse anymore. It had become a spectacle. People were questioning the true nature of Trump's relationships, not just with Ivanka, but with his entire family. The more the media dug into his history with Ivanka, the more the cracks in his carefully constructed image widened. In the days that followed, the fallout continued. Political pundits debated the significance of the moment, some saying it was just another slip-up in a long line of mistakes, while others saw it as a turning point in Trump's political future. The question was simple, but its implications were far-reaching. Had Jasmine uncovered something deeper? Had she opened a door that Trump couldn't close again? For Trump, this wasn't just a question he could brush off. No matter how many rallies he attended, no matter how many speeches he gave, this moment would stick with him. His silence would haunt him for weeks, maybe even months. And every time he stepped in front of the media or the public, they would be waiting for the answer he never gave. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's profile skyrocketed. She became the face of political audacity, the Congresswoman who wasn't afraid to challenge the most powerful man in the world. Her boldness had paid off. She had shown the public that no one, no matter how untouchable, was beyond scrutiny. She had exposed the power dynamics at play, forcing everyone to see the truth behind the curtain. But for Jasmine, it wasn't about the spotlight. It wasn't about winning headlines or becoming the next big political sensation. She had done something far more important. She had shown that real power comes not from the ability to dominate every conversation, but from the courage to ask the hard questions. And in this case, that question was about far more than just Ivanka. It was about the way power, family, and politics collided in ways that no one wanted to acknowledge. As the days turned into weeks, the fallout from that one question continued to unfold. The public began to take sides, some defending Trump, some agreeing with Jasmine's bold stance. But one thing was undeniable. The moment had changed the course of the conversation. Jasmine had made sure of that. Trump was no longer the only one controlling the narrative. For the first time in years, he was forced to reckon with something he had tried to keep hidden. And no matter how much he tried to move past it, the question would linger in the minds of everyone who watched. Why couldn't you answer? Jasmine had turned the tide, and the political world would never be the same.